Hi, y'all. How we doing? This is your host, Rob Napoli. If you're a podcast junkie like me and you're looking for a new podcast to add to your feed, you might want to check out the Success Fundamentals podcast with my guys, Brian Goldstack and Chris Sykes, where they drop weekly episodes that cover all things success and growth. You can find the Success Fundamentals podcast on whatever platforms you enjoy listening to this podcast, the Bear Necessities. Hey y'all, how we doing? Shout out once again to Bear Nation for tuning in to another episode of the Bear Necessities podcast. I am your host, Rob Napoli. The Bear Necessities is a podcast where we sit down with entrepreneurs, ecosystem partners, and innovation folks to talk about what it takes and means to launch, create, and scale business across the world. We talk about the journey and the challenges of being entrepreneur-minded and how that translates into your journey, giving you the tools and knowledge to overcome challenges that you may be facing in your life's journey. The Bear Necessities is part of the Rise Up Media family, and we thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get into the show. Hi, y'all. How we doing? We are back again for another episode of the Bear Necessities podcast. I am your host, Rob Napoli, and today is going to be a fun episode because I have my guy, Nigel Green, on, and Nigel has an amazing background from working in the big city to having his own little homestead and still being a kick-ass sales trainer, working with some of the biggest and best, not just companies, but startups, etc. And he is a lot of fun to talk to. The energy he brings and this show is going to have you on the edge of your seat. So Nigel Green is a sought after sales advisor. He's the author of a book called Revenue Harvest, a sales leader's almanac for planning the perfect year. He's widely regarded authority on improving sales team performance and has worked with just dozens of B2B sales teams across the globe to more than double sales results. And with over 10 years experience in the executive suite from Fortune 500 companies to early stage growth, he's got a certification in talent optimization and works with executives and is sought after to improve sales team performance. His insights have been featured on huge publications like Forbes, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Business Insider, all these badass things. And he was recognized as the top consultant by Selling Power magazine in 21 and 22. So Nigel, welcome to Bear Nation. I'm excited to be sitting down. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we met like 4 months ago. So thanks for being part of it.
Dude, I'm pumped to be here.
So, there's a lot of different things that we just like let in with, and the book, you do amazing workshops, which I've had the opportunity to sit in and see. And those that know me know that I love, training and have been involved in sales training my whole life. So getting to like learn from a master like you, but I kind of want to talk about a bit of your early career and when and how did you get started in sales and what drove you to wanting to be a seller?
What drove me to want to be a seller was money. I was, like you, a football player, played at a small school, and I studied geology because geology was the class that allowed me to be outside all the time. I'm just a dirtbag. If anybody's watching this, you can see I got Surfer's Journal, some deer antlers. If I don't get outside, which is part of we'll get to this when I left the city, is I just need to be outside. I'm just wild. And so played football, studying geology, and then realized, oh, crap, I got to make some money. And geologists don't make money. And it's kind of weird. Like I like to be a dirtbag and I don't need a lot of things, but I like money too. So I got into sales, and it just happened that healthcare sales kind of chose me. So I graduated from college and moved to Jacksonville, Florida, surfing and selling healthcare stuff. And then eventually found my way to Nashville, Tennessee, which was healthcare capital of the U.S. for the most part. And I built a career in healthcare and still do. I live like you alluded to earlier. I live on a homestead now. Left the city in 2018 and live on a farm. And I'm about an hour from the city, so I can get there when I need to, but not as much as pre-COVID because now nobody wants to have a meeting anymore, which I love.
Yeah, I mean here in the city, you're starting to see people are craving for in-person now. So we're starting to see that kind of pick back up, but also the convenience of doing it from home virtually has been nice because, I live in Brooklyn, so I don't have to commute as much every day, but I still need that like once or twice a week go in the city, feel that. Well,
I'll say this though, and before we'll move on, like yes, everyone is craving in person. I am too, but I still don't want to go to another fucking meeting. Like I want to go hang out. I want to go do fun stuff in person, but I am not trying to go to your office and have a meeting.
Yeah, that I will say, I don't think I've done one of those since pre-COVID. I think, it's mostly like, let's go grab a coffee or a beer and have our meeting, but like it's more just like catching up, chatting. And it's interesting how and that's a good thing, right? I think everyone's also just exhausted from meetings because during COVID, we had more meetings than we ever thought possible because we're trying to like build these connections, and we're now realizing that just hinders work as well. But, as you went to Jacksonville, Florida, eventually find your way to Nashville, we've been doing all these things in sales. You obviously wrote a book and consulting. What were some of the lessons? I guess tell me a little bit about what was early sales, Nigel, to like what you learned along the way. Like how did you see your progression and the sales profession change over the last decade?
Well, I think early Nigel was, and I still think it's true now. I mean, I haven't changed much. I am a human, and I've always sold like a human. So part of the reasons why I was never like, I know some folks that were, 7-figure earners back before like SaaS made it even possible, like 7-figure earners in the device world, and they were just machines. Mm-hmm. They could be human and they're relatable, but they were going to run through a wall. I mean, they were unstoppable people. I wasn't ever like that. Like the joke, I was a C student in school, so I never let my studies get in the way of my education. Mm-hmm. Well, I was never going to be one that was like, do one more call, or I was never going to crush the activity. I just was really good at relating to people.
Yeah.
And so I got by, from an efficiency standpoint, I would hit my quota on the fewest dials, fewest meetings. That was my MO.
Yeah.
And it served me well now because I've been able to adapt as buyer sentiment and customer behavior has changed. Mm-hmm. I was talking to someone in leadership at Gartner yesterday that said, people are worried about the autonomous human and the elimination of humans from selling. And I said, people don't need to worry about that because there are a lot of sellers that have already chosen the path of being a robot.
Yeah.
And are no longer humans. They're just doing repetitive tasks, and we see it on LinkedIn and we see it in email, and it's bad. So Nigel, old Nigel and new Nigel, has always been one that's like, I don't give a rip about the activity. Show me the results. And that's what I'm coaching a lot of the executive teams. They major in the minor things. They get so caught up in, well, how many meetings did they have, and how many people did you talk to? And I'm like, nope, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. I love that you bring up that sentiment because I worked for a large global corporate recruitment firm, and I had never seen so many KPIs in my entire life. How many dials I had to make, how many specs I had to send out, how many, connected calls I had to make, how many there was tons of KPIs, and you kind of bring this up of like extra dials. We used to live in a KPI centric world. We still have KPIs now, but like with the power of like LinkedIn and these things, we see the connect and pitch. But we talk about, you talked about being human and how selling is human. When you're training sales teams and you're talking to VPs and you're talking to executives about activity, how do you handle that conversation? And what do you see some of the trends on activity from a KPI world to like selling is human world that you just talked about?
Well, the first thing that I do, and you're kind of alluding to, you participated in my core offering, which is a 1-day double your sales workshop, mm-hmm. and named it that because that's essentially what we do. I go into sales teams and I give the leadership team a new playbook that they can run that will double their sales. Every playbook is bespoke. It's not a rinse and repeat workshop as you've seen. It truly is about their go-to-market strategy, how they're creating customers, and I build it around that. But the first thing that I typically see in every one of these, Rob, is that they have a sales process, which is fine. It's good mm-hmm. to have a sales process. Mm-hmm. But the problem is it doesn't map to the buying process. So they've got ways in which they're creating sales that are fundamentally misaligned with the way their ideal customer, they still get customers, but the way their ideal customer wants to do business with them. So when we get them to stop and look at the buying process for their ideal customers, the companies, the logos that they want to have that could change the landscape of the business, they bought differently than the other 80% of the accounts. And so they built a sales process around the accounts that they don't really care about.
Yeah.
The big ones that they want, whether it be big in size or big in stature, bought differently, and their sales process is mismatched with that, so it doesn't scale. So I have to go in and say, I don't care what your sales process is. How does your ideal customer want to buy? And let's start mapping our behavior around what they want us to do.
Yeah. I love that because, for the longest time, sales and marketing have been two different things on islands, and they have to really come together because the way we buy is so different in the way that we search for things, the way we consume things, the way we connect with things, the way we go seek out referrals. So I love that's the core kind of piece of it. And the other thing to think about too is when you have a sales process, that's a good thing. But when you go on, especially talking to executives and founders, especially when you're working with growth stage companies, their brain is very in like 5 different places. Right. And so getting them to think about the buyer journey and really look at, it's really easy to get pulled away from the customer. And I think so many times that I see and talk to people, they're so far removed from what the customer is actually doing, and they're just seeing numbers on a page. And so bringing them back to that customer, I think is key. And so many people forget to do that. And you talked about, think about SDRs today. And, how they're going in and picking up the phone and dialing and connecting. It's just, we see it all the time, this like pitch, wash, rinse, repeat, pitch everything. And that's so hard to do. Like you need to have kind of 2 processes based on who your ideal customer is. What was, going back to you in your younger days, what was one of the most transformative experiences you had in sales?
Getting put on a PIP at a very early age.
Yeah.
Getting put on a PIP. And I mean, I was not at plan. So the PIP was warranted. I was probably 75 to 77. I can't remember the specific numbers. I've got the PIP somewhere because I saved it because it was so transformative. But the transformational piece wasn't the PIP. It wasn't like the PIP like woke me up and it changed. It was that the leader that put me on the PIP did not understand what I actually needed to do in order to recover my performance. He focused too much on activity when really what I needed to focus on was less activity and spending more time with the opportunities I had to make our offering and our proposal more compelling and more competitive. So that the transformation in that, well, it's not a criticism of this leader, but it was for me to say, actually, I'm probably better at leading because I understand the human side of this better and I'm more interested in it probably because of my background in sports and being around coaches. I want to coach.
Yeah.
I think I want to do this. I think I want to lead teams more than just be a producer. And so I quit.
Really?
Yeah, quit, moved to Nashville and took a job leading a team. So I went from being on a PIP to in Nashville, building a team and leading a team.
That's kind of amazing. I mean, I think the first thing you said was focusing on less activity and more on the opportunities you have. And that is so counterintuitive to most things you hear about in sales. Like more activity means more opportunities means more opportunity to close, more closes mean more money. And that transformation of like that leader not looking at you as a human and as one of the whole team. And before I get into like your leadership, like as you as a consultant now and talking to leaders, how do you coach that? How do you talk to an executive or a sales leader to think that way? And do you see that as something that needs more of from leadership? Or are they seeing that too, and that's something that's a trend that you've noticed?
Well, Rob, you talked about this earlier. You said they just look at spreadsheets. And so I'm meeting with founders and commercial CEOs and asking them the questions like, when's the last time you sold this? Or when's the last time you sat down with a customer? Because it changes really quickly. And buying behavior has really, really changed since COVID. For example, there was a lot of formalized teaching, even in universities, and a lot of sales books about relationship selling and rapport and connecting. And all that's like very human, natural human behavior, and it's a good thing. But guess what? I do not want to be your friend. I do not want, I remember when I was 25, 26, I had a manager. At the time, it was right. Like he would say to me, you got to be willing to go to their kids' soccer game, your customers' kids' soccer games, and go out and grab drinks with them. And some of that still exists, but man, there are so many sales cycles now where the buyer they just want you to do the thing. They want you to fulfill the value that is promised by the offering. They do not want to be bros. Mm-hmm. And so that's just been, and so I asked all that to say, I asked the executive team, well, when's the last time you sold it? Because maybe you're teaching them to be highly relational and your customer does not want it. They just want it done. And so you got to know, your job as a leader is you got to really know not only what the problems are that your customers face, but how they want you to solve them.
Yeah. Wow. I love that because it makes me think, puts me back when I was selling early in Des Moines, Iowa. It was very relationship based. And I learned sales as a relationship based, account based selling, was in large Fortune 500 accounts, recruiting different teams. And, part of being their friend is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because then you're expecting them to maybe treat you differently, and you think that you're going to close more deals than you actually do because there's the relationship. There's also the thing that, are you delivering, and are you delivering value, and are you coming through with your offering? And that was a tough lesson I learned. And, I was like, oh, I know them really well. I'm going there, playing golf with them, soccer, all that stuff. But then I wasn't closing deals with them. And my boss was like, yo, what's going on? I thought you said you were going to close this. You're friends with them. You're taking them out. And I was like, holy shit. That was the first time I was put on performance. And I had to think about, what is the relationship? What is delivery? And it was when I figured out those two things that my life changed in sales, because that is hard to do.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I remember I coached this woman who has a sales team who had a bunch of reps that were struggling with some of the things you said you were struggling with. And I told her, I said, Misty, I said, you know what the friend zone is? And she said, what do you mean? I said, you know what I mean? When you were dating, she's been married, got kids now. I said, but remember, there were guys that were in the friend zone and they didn't even know they were in the friend zone. They thought you guys were on dates, but you just were looking for a snuggle partner.
Yeah.
You just wanted somebody, you would call them after a breakup to talk to them about the guy you just broke up with, or to go give coffee with when you're boring. But that was it. And there are a lot of sellers that are just in the friend zone. There's no S word happening. There's no sale.
Yeah. I thought you were going somewhere very different.
Bingo, that's the point. But there's no S. There's no S going on. There's no sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love that you share that, because even now to today, for me, I learned sales in a small market like Des Moines. And then I went to Italy, spent 2 years, was head of content and sales for a B2C company. And then when I came back to New York, I went back into recruiting at this large global firm. And I was overwhelmed. And the fact that it was very transactional, it was very KPI focused. And I was more relationship, and I'm going to build this long-term partnerships and shit. And I was I got my ass kicked for the first 6 months. When you're talking to these executives and you're talking to and training these sales teams, when you think about different markets across, the United States, right? When you think about New York to Florida to Nashville to Iowa, do you take into account kind of big city versus a smaller city at all in the way that speed happens and how you kind of adapt to the buyer journey and how people buy and how people sell? Is that a factor at all that you see?
I think it's a factor. It's not one that I really consider because most of my work is around executive leadership. So I'm coaching folks that either in the C-suite and they fill in over their head or are trying to get to the C-suite. And, I don't want to, I think there's probably is something there. It just doesn't come up a lot for me. I'm typically working on, so here's how it might play out. Similar, same, but different, right? I do see a lot of sales leaders that are trying to hire someone in a market. Okay. So they're like, well, I need someone to cover Massachusetts and New York. And I'm like, why do you need someone to cover Massachusetts and New York? And then when I ask the question, well, we got all these opportunities that are in that geographical area. Okay. Well, then how many of those opportunities in those geographical area require that you to physically be with them in order for the deal to get done? Well, none of them. Well, where's your best rep live? Best rep lives in Des Moines, Iowa. Why don't you assign these opportunities to the best rep in Des Moines, Iowa? And in the rare circumstance that we need to go to New York or Massachusetts for a face-to-face meeting, why don't we fly Des Moines, Iowa to Massachusetts and have a meeting?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, why don't we do that? I'm like, so it's like territories are a set of assigned accounts and opportunities. It's not zip codes. It's not geography. And that was true. I talked about this in Revenue Harvest before the pandemic, but buddy, if you didn't believe it then, it's true now.
Yeah. And I love that you say that because also too, like talent is everywhere. And so why are you trying to put somebody somewhere versus taking some of your best talent? And that's where this like leadership stuff comes in. And I kind of want to cycle back to this because it's something that I've talked about a lot. I actually said this on Colin's podcast when I was sitting down with Colin Mitchell on his podcast at the time of Sales Hustle, Not Sales Transformation. And we were talking about sellers and promoting to leadership. And you made this point of like, you were on PIP and then you went to Nashville to lead a team and you wanted to be a coach. And you saw that out of you. And I made this quote, right? And I was like thinking about like, I was using an example as Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid is one of the best football coaches out there. Still in the game today. He played at BYU, was a pretty good player, wasn't the best, right? But he's become one of the best coaches. Not every great player will be a great coach. And not every great coach is a great player. So when you're talking to executives and you're talking about how to build sales teams and bringing in the right people, right? Because you do a lot with talent optimization and helping them find the right people for the organization. How do you talk about evaluating talent as it relates to sales leadership?
So evaluating sales leadership talent, I still stick to the same 3 C's as in the letter C, the 3 C's that I subscribe to for hiring selling talent, which is character first, chemistry second, competency third. And a lot of people hear that and say competency third. Well, if you hire the person of the right character and chemistry, they're going to figure out the competency, right? There's a baseline. I have a baseline expectation that you're competent in the role because you've done it before or you've got some intangibles that lead me to believe you're going to be successful in it. I'm not talking about competency like 10 years experience selling biopharma with an MBA. Like, get out of here with that bullshit. I'm not looking for that. But what I'll say about sales leaders is typically one way that I know if they're good or not is how they answer this question. Rob, if I hire you tomorrow to come lead this sales team, who's coming with you? And when they say, what do you mean? One, they don't get it. But when I know they get it, they say, oh, well, I'll tell you this. You hire me. I'm going to go get this kid, Jamie, that used to work for me two lives ago. He's a straight hustler. And then Amy is going to come. I'm going to go get this person. And they know that, like, I'm not going to go hire. I don't need to go hire a bunch of people that have this quote unquote competency of industry experience because none of that really maps. I'm hiring someone that's going to build a team based on character and chemistry, and they are a leader worth following because they can rattle off names of people that are going to come with them.
I love that. I mean, I immediately thought of my buddy Nick Garibaldi, who worked for me at Half Day Group and has grown into one of the best. Like, he leads sales at a large company in Italy now, and he's like 24, 25 because of what he was able to do in the New York market. And I was like, that was my immediate thought. Then I was like, well, maybe it's a trick question on like what clients are coming with you. I love that it's what people are coming with you. And you don't need to go out and hire in terms of like, now I got to go out and start the sales hiring process, which is really tough. I have people that I can bring on board that we know are good, that can go make shit happen. And that is, I love that question. Oh, that's,
well, think of it like, I mean, we're football guys, so we can stick with it. Like, I mean, kids that play football want to go, yes, there is some affiliation with a university that's tied to history and ranking, but they get sold on a university because of the coach that recruited them. Mm-hmm. Some coach sat in their house with their parents, grandparents, and family and promised them something that resonated with them, and that's why they went to go play football with them. Mm-hmm. I think really good sales leaders have to be like good football coaches. Mm-hmm. And there's this joke. I have to admit it's kind of terrible, but I'm going to say it. I heard one head football coach, and I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about how he knows if a coach is a good recruiter. Somebody asked him, say, "Hey, coach, how do you know if somebody you're going to hire is a good recruiter?" He said, "I just look at their wife. If their wife's pretty, I know they can recruit. If their wife's ugly, they can't recruit." And I think about sales leaders, and I look at their team, and I'm like, can you go get, and I'm not talking about physical appearances here, but can you go and build a team that they don't have to be the best in this industry, but can you go and get someone to quit a job where they're being successful at plan to come start over with you? That is what you need in order to be a sales leader.
I love that. Do you believe sales leaders should carry a quota?
Yeah, they should carry a quota, but I don't think they're an individual contributor. I mean, sales leaders carry the quota of the team, and they get full autonomy in how they distribute that quota to the individuals that participate on the team.
Yeah, I asked that question because
I had a coaching call. Well, I had a coaching call earlier today, so I'll finish this thought here, and I'll let you carry on. But I was on the phone with a leader today that's in a role where it's unavoidable for her to not participate, right? I'm not one of those guys that says you can't be a player coach. Mm-hmm. But what I told her boss in a follow-up call was, it's unfair for you to say the sales leader has to produce and you get to control how much her production is and set the quota for everyone else. That's not how it works. You, the CEO, you give a number to the sales leader. You want her to carry part of it. You let her decide how much she's going to carry and then how much she's going to distribute to the rest of the team. Because ultimately, I'm just going to hold that sales leader accountable to whether or not the bigger number was hit. Because it won't be acceptable for that sales leader to come to me and say, well, hey, Nigel, I hit my number, but the team failed. I don't give a rip. You failed.
Yeah. Well, I love that because, I mean, that's a conversation I see happen all the time. And one of the hardest roles out there is being a VP of sales, especially if you have to carry your own individual contributor as a number and lead a team. And it's like, well, no, you got to carry this number and the team number. Like, I love that there needs to be that autonomy there. So I want to ask you a little bit about your book, The Revenue Harvest. So what inspired you to want to write a book and share these lessons that you've learned over your years and put pen to paper? Because, I just wrote a book, came out this year, and I can tell you it was one of the scariest things to put out your thoughts and your experience out there, because people are going to receive it or they're not. They're going to tear it up. So what was what kind of inspired you to write Revenue Harvest, and what was the impact you wanted to make with your book?
Well, I never wanted to write a book. I wasn't I never wanted to be a best-selling author, or I don't like the term influencer. I don't consider myself as in that category. The motivation for me was, what a shame it would be if I have this aha moment of living in a farming community and being able to take the role of a sales leader and this novel approach of taking the work of the agrarian leader, the farmer or the rancher, and giving sales leaders another lens through which to see the job. What a waste that would be to be sitting on this and not doing something with it. So it was almost like, it was this monkey that I had to get off my back versus like some aspirational goal. I found myself, like it was haunting me. So one of my favorite like non-sales books is called Ascend County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And it's just a journal of like nature writings that I really enjoy. And then like I'm sitting there just trying to read this book, and I'm thinking, a sales leader's almanac for planning the perfect year. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking about. And I'm like, all right, damn it, I got to just write this book. And so it was a burden more than it was an aspiration.
Yeah. Well, I love how that inspiration came about though too. And I had a chance to read Revenue Harvest, and what I really enjoyed about it was the fact that it doesn't feel like, I've read every, sales book out there as I know you have. It didn't feel like I was reading a sales book and it's like, you have to do this and you have to do this. It's like, it felt like it was speaking to me in a way that's easy to read. It made sense. It was very easy to grasp the concepts. And it's like, oh, here's how you can change some of those thoughts, or the way that you respond to a question, or the way you respond to pushback. And here's how you leverage that, and how easy it can be to kind of move the needle. And that to me was really what I thought hit home for me, was like those little things. I know there's like bigger things that you have in the book, but what really spoke to me was just those little subtle little things that you can change. And it makes a big difference. It makes the process more human. It makes the connection of what you can, the value and the delivery and the way that you build that, I don't want to say like relationship, but you build that connection of, hey, this is the service we can provide for you. Here's how we're going to do it better. And here's how we're going to take care of you and make sure that we deliver. So I loved it. And I love the way that it's like kind of the farming. I grew up in the Midwest, so family had a 90-acre farm. And so I love the whole concept behind it. When you lived in a big city, you've been all around the U.S. working and doing different things. What was the impetus for you to leave kind of the big city life and start a farm and do all the things that you're doing to help others grow and scale the way that you have done in your career?
Well, I think in its simplest form, it was probably selfish. I mean, I remember May of 2018, and my Uncle Dale reminded me of something that he's told me most of my professional career, that what you work on works on you, meaning that the things that you choose to pursue inevitably change who you are. And it was becoming clear to me that if I stayed in this healthcare scene and continued to chase all of the trappings that come along with a high-paid CMO, CSO, CRO job, I'm just chasing another exit. I'm chasing more money in the bank account at the expense of probably getting fatter than I wanted to, being more stressed out, caring about what other people thought, ignoring the development of my kids the way that I wanted to, right? I'm not judging anybody that does it. It's like I'm clear enough, even at that age of, I think I was 34 when I just moved and pulled the plug. I was clear on who I wanted to be. And it wasn't like I never wanted to be this big perpetual entrepreneur. I wanted to be a guy that just had enough money to go play. I wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to have pursuits outside of work. Work's not who I am. And I just realized that, shit, if I didn't create real spatial distance for me, I was at real risk of no longer being that person anymore.
Yeah.
Not that wild college football player that studied geology, that lived to get up and surf or go do wild things. Like I wasn't going to do that anymore. I was going to live in a city that would eat me alive. And so I said, I'm out. And a lot of people thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe some still do, but I'm living my life, which is someone that puts work in a box. I mean, there's a sign back here that says not all that wonder are lost. And one of the things I talk about in Revenue Harvest is I fundamentally believe that we work to live, not live to work. And that's just me. And so I had to live those truths, and I had to hold myself accountable and quit chasing another dollar.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Everyone has their own path and their own, opportunities and decisions they have to make. And you got to be true to yourself. And so I love that you kind of take that, and it definitely shines through the book. Do you feel that you've been able to make a bigger impact living that truth than being some CMO, CSO, CRO at some big city healthcare firm? Do you feel that you're making that impact that you really want to be?
I don't know that I'm making a bigger impact. I'm making the impact that I want, which is the most important impact is on my kids and my wife and my closest friends and a small number of colleagues versus 100,000 folks on LinkedIn. So I'm choosing my impact, and I'm going deep with right now a 6-year-old boy that I just care more about than anything else.
I love that. I think that's everyone's goal, right? Is what impact. I always like to ask this question: like, what impact do you want to create in the world, and how do you see yourself doing that? And that's something that you are a living truth of, and that's something that drew me to you instantly when we got connected and when we had our first conversation. And we had like a 30-minute call in the book, so we were talking for like 45 minutes. We were kind of about like, oh shit, we got other calls. We got to get stuff going. And that's something that I really, because as I go through, a part of me launching this podcast was the impact I wanted to make. That there are so many amazing people out there with stories to tell, and you tend to see on these podcasts, especially entrepreneurship, it's always like the company that went Series A, Series B, and no one actually talks about what it means to start a business, what it means to create a company, what it means to see a problem that you want to be the solution for, and putting your mind to creating something. And yes, there's glory in that at some point, but in order to get glory, you have to go through hell. And it's messy, and it's not easy. It's not a straight, narrow path. Right? Life has a lot of twists and turns. And so that was kind of part of the reason that the podcast came to be, and why I share these different stories. And it's a lot of entrepreneurs, but bring in different experts. And, you and yourself in your own right, entrepreneurs starting your own business, you got the book, the workshops are amazing, and the impact you get to make with these organizations and the way you talk to leaders. So it's been awesome to see that. And I love it. So as we kind of close out, what do you see, 2022, what do you see for you? Like, what are the things that you're working on, and what are you excited about this year that you get to be a part of for Q2 and Q3 as we head into this year?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think I really enjoy the workshops that I get to do. I do 1 to 2 of those a month. It gives me a lot of energy just to be able to work with founders and sales teams and see some aha moments for them. So I'll continue to do workshops throughout the year, outside of November and December when I take my sabbatical. Man, I'm gonna play and work. I've recently become more involved with a business that I'm a partner in called Affirm Health. It's another healthcare company, and I'm enjoying getting back into an individual contributor role with 2 founders that I really like and love them as humans, and it gives me something to build and stay fresh in doing the work. My wife turns 40 this year, so we're going to go to Paris and have a trip. But yeah, man, I'm just gonna play hard. I'm gonna play hard this year. That's what I'm gonna do.
Well, you could expect me to come down and visit you sometime this year. It's really easy for me to get to Nashville, so you have to come pick me up and take me out. But I want to come check out the Homestead and play hard too, because as people see, one of the things that he talked about, you got antlers in the background. If you look up above my mantle, my antlers as well. I haven't hunted in a long time, but back in the day, those were actually the one up there is my first deer I shot when I was 10 or 11 on the family farm. And I got all kinds of stuff. So it's something that we'll have to make happen. Every guest I have on the show, I always like to ask this question is, what do you feel your superpower is?
Yeah. My superpower is probably 1 or 2 connections away from any outcome that I need to make, whether that's for a friend or a colleague, or I just thank the Lord for it, because it's all stuff He's given me. I'm probably just 1 or 2 texts or phone calls away from getting the meeting I want, or making a surprise happen for a customer, or that's my superpower. Just be like, who do I know that can help me? And then boom, I can get it done.
I love it. I think that's a great superpower to have. And that's one that takes being human to do, right? Everyone likes to talk about how big their network is and all these things. But if you're not human and have real relationships and make those deep connections, you can't have that as a superpower. And that's something that you live. I love it. What's part
of the superpower though, Rob? Part of the superpower is like knowing that in order to exercise the asks, you got to be a go-giver. And I learned that from reading Bob Burg's book earlier in life. The Go-Giver is like, I just love I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. Well, you want it? Let's let it rip. Let's go.
Dude, I love that you bring that up. And I don't think we ever talked about this, but one of the books that changed my life and my career and changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do, I read The Go-Giver Sells More when I was in Italy, and it changed my whole life on the kind of person I wanted to be and how I wanted to leverage my network and the impact. And it's driven the decisions to launch the business that I had from a US go-to-market entry company and helping companies come over, helping companies raise up, helping entrepreneurs overcome. So I didn't realize that book was that book hit home the same way. But that was one of those books that changed the way I thought about the impact I wanted to create. So I love that connection. What's a lasting message? What advice do you want to give as a lasting message for people listening today?
Don't take yourself so seriously. I mean, it's just, you're here for an instant, and even if you live a long life, 80 plus years, it's just an instant. Just don't take yourself so seriously.
I love that. And where can my listeners find you? How can I get a hold of you? Where can I learn more about the book, what you're doing, the workshops, the work that you do?
Yeah, the easiest way is go to therevenueharvest.com. You can get the ebook and the audiobooks, and I read the audiobook, so you can get this soft Southern drawl in your ear for about 5 hours for $5. So for a cup of coffee or less nowadays with inflation, you can go get a digital book, whether iTunes, Kindle, and the audiobook for $5. And I think it's probably the best $5 you spend today.
I love it. Well, I'll make sure to have that link in the show notes. All you have to do, listeners, is click it and go find it and go make it happen. I promise you, it's worth reading, but I wish that I had your Southern drawl in my ear for 5 hours. I think that would have been way better. Because when I read the book, I promise you, I had your voice in my head the whole time. Like, I was thinking of you reading it to me. And now that I know that I can go get it and listen to it, I might just go listen to it just to hear your voice for 5 hours. So I'll make sure to link that in for Bear Nation. Nigel, I appreciate it. I know we could talk for hours, but I want to respect your time. I appreciate you for sharing the knowledge, sharing a bit about your journey, some challenges, and some great wisdom. Thank you so much for being a part of Bear Nation, my guy.
My pleasure.
All right, Bear Nation, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Until next time, stay well and rise up. Bear Nation, once again, thank you for tuning in and listening to the Bear Necessities podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review. It really does help and means a lot to us at the show. And I want to thank our friends over at Finn. Finn is a social good platform that creates employee engagement and builds culture. It's our mission to support and give back to the communities that we serve around the world. And we do this by giving every guest on our show a $10 donation to the cause of their choosing using the Finn platform. Until next time, thank y'all, stay well, and rise up. If you hadn't already heard about it, or you don't already know, my new book, The Social Soul, How to Master Your Personal and Professional Brand with Intentionality and Authenticity, is out now. You can find it on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Go check it out, purchase a copy, let me know what you think, leave me a review. I appreciate y'all for the support. Can't wait to hear from you what stood out the most.